She invited the poor waiter just to mock him, but the Mafia boss stood up and said, "To my brother." That single moment would change everything. In a world where the wealthy believed their money could buy silence, dignity, and even the right to humiliate others, one man was about to remind them that respect has no price tag. Chapter 1. The grand ballroom of the Sterling Hotel in Manhattan glittered like a constellation fallen to earth. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors, illuminating the most powerful faces in New York society. It was the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala, an event where fortunes were displayed like trophies and social standing was measured in zeros. Marcus Rivera adjusted his white serving jacket for the 100th time that evening. At 26 years old, he had worked at the Sterling for 3 years, saving every penny for night classes at community college. His hands, rough from years of honest work, carried silver trays with practiced grace. His mother always told him that dignity lived not in what a man owned, but in how he carried himself. Tonight he carried himself like a king disguised as a servant. The evening had been uneventful until Victoria Ashford arrived. She swept into the ballroom wearing a gown that cost more than Marcus would earn in 5 years. Her blonde hair was pulled into an elegant chignon, diamonds dripping from her ears and throat. At 32, Victoria was the heiress to the Ashford pharmaceutical empire, a woman who had never been told no, who had never waited in line, who had never wondered if she could afford rent. Victoria spotted Marcus immediately. Something about his quiet confidence irritated her. Servants were supposed to be invisible, forgettable, interchangeable, but this one moved through the crowd with an almost regal bearing, his dark eyes observing everything with intelligence that felt almost threatening to her. She whispered something to her circle of friends, and cruel laughter rippled through the group, like poison spreading through water. Marcus felt their eyes on him. He had learned long ago to recognize that particular quality of attention, the way predators watched prey. But he continued his work, delivering champagne flutes with steady hands and a professional smile that revealed nothing of his inner thoughts. The trap was set with surgical precision. Victoria waited until the ballroom was at its fullest, until every influential person in New York society was present and watching. Then she raised her hand, summoning Marcus with a gesture that belonged to a different century. He approached her table with the tray balanced perfectly. 6 faces watched him with barely concealed amusement. Victoria's date for the evening, a hedge fund manager named Preston, was already smirking. "You there," Victoria said, her voice carrying deliberately across nearby tables. "What is your name?" "Marcus, ma'am. How may I assist you?" "Marcus." She tasted the name like it was something unpleasant. "Tell me, Marcus, do you know what this gala is celebrating tonight?" "The Whitmore Foundation's work in education, ma'am." "Education? How fitting." Victoria exchanged glances with her friends. "And tell me, Marcus, are you educated?" The question was a trap, and everyone at the table knew it. If he said yes, she would mock his station. If he said no, she would mock his ignorance. "I am currently pursuing my degree in business administration, ma'am," Marcus replied evenly. "I attend classes in the evenings." Victoria's eyebrows rose in exaggerated surprise. "A waiter going to business school, how ambitious." The word dripped with contempt. "And what do you think you will do with this education? Do you imagine yourself sitting at tables like this one someday?" Laughter erupted from her companions. Marcus felt heat rise to his face, but kept his expression neutral. He had survived worse than this. He had buried his father at 16, had worked 2 jobs to keep his mother in her home, had walked through neighborhoods where bullets were more common than butterflies. A rich woman's cruelty was nothing compared to what life had already thrown at him. "I imagine myself building something meaningful, ma'am," he said quietly. "Something that lasts." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She did not like his answer. She did not like that he refused to crumble, refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing him broken. "How touching," she said. "Well, since you dream of sitting at fine tables, why do we not give you a preview?" She gestured to an empty chair at the end of the table. "Please sit, join us." The invitation was a snake wearing a smile. Marcus understood exactly what she was doing. She wanted him to sit so she could humiliate him further, so she could display her power over him like a trophy. "Ma'am, I am on duty. I cannot. I insist." Victoria's voice hardened. "Unless you would like me to speak with your manager about your attitude problem." The threat hung in the air. Marcus needed this job. His mother's medical bills were mounting. His tuition was due in 2 weeks. He could not afford to be fired. Slowly, painfully, he set down his tray and lowered himself into the chair. Victoria beamed with triumph. "There. Now is that not better? Tell me, how does it feel to finally sit with your betters?" The table erupted in laughter again. Preston was recording the entire exchange on his phone, no doubt planning to share it with his equally privileged friends. Marcus sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. "You know what I think?" Victoria leaned forward, her voice carrying to the surrounding tables. "I think people like you should know their place. You work hard, I'm sure, but no amount of night school will ever change what you are. You will always be the man carrying the tray. You will always be—" "Victoria." The voice cut through the ballroom like a blade through silk. It was quiet, but it carried an authority that made even the chandeliers seem to dim in deference. Victoria's face went pale. She turned slowly toward the voice, and Marcus saw something he had never expected to see in her eyes: fear. A man approached the table. He was tall, perhaps 40 years old, with silver threading through dark hair that was combed back from a face that could have been carved from granite. He wore a simple black suit, but it fit him like it had been created specifically for his body. Everything about him radiated controlled power, the kind of strength that did not need to announce itself, because it was evident in every breath, every movement, every glance. But it was his eyes that caught Marcus's attention. They were grey, like storm clouds gathering over the ocean, and they held a quality of stillness that suggested he had seen things most people could not imagine. "Mr. Castellano," Victoria stammered, "I did not realize you were attending tonight." Clearly, the man's gaze swept over the table like a searchlight, and everywhere it touched, people seemed to shrink. "What exactly is happening here?" "We were just having a bit of fun." Victoria tried to laugh, but the sound died in her throat. "Just a harmless joke with one of the staff." Dominic Castellano turned his attention to Marcus. For a long moment he simply looked at the young man, studying him with an intensity that felt almost physical. Marcus met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to be ashamed of his white jacket and his calloused hands. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but it was there, a flicker of recognition, not of the face, but of the spirit. "What is your name?" Dominic asked. "Marcus Rivera, sir." "Stand up, Marcus." Marcus rose from the chair, uncertain what was happening but unwilling to show fear. He had learned that lesson from his father. Never let them see you flinch. Dominic turned to the table. "Do any of you know who this man is?" Confused glances were exchanged. Victoria shook her head slightly. "Neither do I," Dominic continued. "But I know who he is not. He is not your entertainment. He is not your prop. He is not a tool for your amusement." His voice never rose, but each word landed like a hammer strike. "He is a man who works for his living. A man who shows up, who serves with dignity, who is trying to build something better for himself. That makes him worth more than everyone at this table combined." Victoria's face had gone from pale to grey. "Mr. Castellano, You were only what? Being yourself?" Dominic's smile was colder than winter in Brooklyn. "I have known your family for 20 years, Victoria. Your father built his empire by crushing people smaller than him. It seems the apple has not fallen far from the tree." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim leather case. From it, he extracted a business card and handed it to Marcus. "Monday morning, 9 o'clock, my office at Castellano Holdings. Come prepared to interview for a position in our development division." Marcus stared at the card. The name printed on it was one he recognized from newspapers, from whispered conversations, from the kind of stories that made people look over their shoulders before speaking. Dominic Castellano was not just wealthy. He was legendary. He had arrived in New York 30 years ago with nothing and had built an empire that spanned real estate, restaurants, construction, and a dozen other industries. What the newspapers did not report, what everyone knew but no one dared speak aloud, was that his power extended far beyond legitimate business. "Sir, I do not understand," Marcus said. Dominic looked at him with those storm-grey eyes. "I see myself in you, Marcus. 30 years ago I was carrying trays at a restaurant in Queens. I know what it is to be invisible. I know what it is to be dismissed." He paused. "But I also know what it is to rise." He turned back to Victoria and her stunned companions. Then he did something that would become legend in New York society, something that would be whispered about at every gala and dinner party for years to come. Dominic Castellano picked up a champagne flute from the table. He raised it high so that the entire ballroom could see. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward the scene. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dominic announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom, "I would like to propose a toast." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "To my brother Marcus Rivera, The words echoed through the ballroom like thunder. Victoria looked like she might faint. Preston had stopped recording, his face frozen in horror at what he had captured. Across the room, people were pulling out their phones, sensing that they were witnessing something significant. Dominic clinked his glass against the one sitting in front of Marcus's empty chair, then drank deeply. "Your invitation to this event has just been revoked, Victoria," he said quietly, "and I would strongly suggest you find a new charity to support. The Whitmore Foundation will not be needing your donations anymore. Not when they learn how you treat the people who serve them." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Without a word, she gathered her purse and fled, her entourage scrambling to follow. The ballroom buzzed with whispered speculation. Dominic placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Walk with me." They moved through the crowd together, and Marcus noticed how people parted before Dominic like waves before a ship. No one dared meet his eyes. No one dared speak to him without being addressed first. This was power, not the kind that could be bought or inherited, but the kind that was earned through decades of proving that you were not someone to be crossed. They stepped onto a balcony overlooking Central Park. The night air was crisp, carrying the distant sounds of traffic and the faint scent of autumn leaves. The city stretched below them, a galaxy of lights that held 8 million stories. "Why?" Marcus asked finally. "Why would you do that for me? You do not even know me." Dominic was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city he had conquered. "Because I remember what it was like to be where you are, to be hungry, to be dismissed, to be treated like you were worth less than the dirt on someone's shoes." He turned to face Marcus. "And because I have learned something in my 60 years on this earth, the measure of a man is not in how he treats his equals, it is in how he treats those who can do nothing for him." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that had been hardened by years of struggle beginning to crack. "I also have a good eye for talent," Dominic continued. "The way you handled yourself in there, the way you refused to break, that takes strength. I can teach you everything else, but I cannot teach character. You either have it or you do not. You have it. What exactly are you offering me?" Dominic smiled, and for a moment he looked almost fatherly. "A chance, the same chance someone gave me when I was your age. I cannot promise it will be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. But if you work hard, if you prove yourself, I will give you the tools to build the life you deserve." Marcus looked at the business card still clutched in his hand. It felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. It felt like the weight of possibility, of futures that had not existed 5 minutes ago. "What do I have to do?" "Show up Monday morning. The rest we will figure out together." They stood in silence for a moment longer. Two men from different generations, but forged from the same fire, looking out at a city that had tried to crush them both and failed. Marcus did not know what the future held. He did not know if this was genuine opportunity or some elaborate game, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. His life would never be the same. Somewhere in the ballroom behind them, Victoria Ashford was crying, her mascara running down her face as she tried to comprehend how her evening of entertainment had transformed into social destruction. Tomorrow, every newspaper and gossip column in the city would carry the story. The heir to the Ashford fortune, publicly humiliated by the most powerful man in New York for mocking a waiter. The rich, Marcus was learning, could fall just as far as anyone else. They simply had further to fall. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. The stories here are about to change the way you see loyalty, power, and what it truly means to rise from nothing. Subscribe now, because what happens next will leave you breathless. Chapter 2. Monday morning arrived wrapped in grey clouds and the kind of cold that seeped through jackets and settled into bones. Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside Castellano Holdings, a glass tower in Midtown that reflected the sky like a mirror of ambition. He wore his best suit, the one he had bought for his father's funeral 10 years ago, altered twice now to accommodate his growing frame. The lobby was cavernous, all marble and chrome, with a waterfall cascading down one wall and security guards who looked like they could bench-press small cars. Marcus approached the reception desk, feeling acutely aware of how out of place he looked among the sleek executives striding past in suits that cost more than his car. "Marcus Rivera," he said to the receptionist. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. Castellano." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. She was clearly not accustomed to people who looked like Marcus claiming appointments with the building's owner. "One moment, please." She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, listened, then looked at Marcus with new respect in her eyes. "Take the private elevator to the 40th floor. Mr. Castellano is expecting you. The private elevator. Marcus felt like he had stepped into another dimension, a world where the rules he had always known no longer applied. The 40th floor was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was a single, vast space, more like a penthouse apartment than an office. Windows wrapped around three sides, offering panoramic views of Manhattan that made the city look like a toy model. The furniture was elegant, but masculine, dark leather, polished wood, artwork that probably belonged in museums. Dominic Castellano stood by the window, his back to Marcus, watching the city below with the air of a general surveying his territory. "You are 10 minutes early," Dominic said without turning. "Good. Punctuality is the foundation of trustworthiness. My mother always said that being on time means being late. If you are not early, you are wasting someone's time." Dominic turned, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is the wisest person I know. Sit." Dominic gestured to a chair across from his desk. "We have much to discuss." Marcus sat, maintaining eye contact despite the impulse to look away. He had learned early that people respected those who met their gaze, especially when they were intimidated. "Before we begin," Dominic said, settling into his own chair, "I need you to understand something. What I am offering you is not charity. I do not believe in charity. It creates dependency, and dependency creates weakness. What I am offering is opportunity, the kind that comes with expectations, demands, and consequences. I understand, sir. Do you? Do you understand that if you accept this position, your life will change in ways you cannot imagine? That you will be entering a world with its own rules, its own dangers, its own rewards?" Marcus thought about his mother, struggling to pay for medications that seemed to increase in price every month. He thought about the apartment in Washington Heights where he had grown up, where bullet holes still pocked the walls of the building next door. He thought about his father, who had worked himself into an early grave trying to provide for his family. "I understand that where I come from there are no easy paths," Marcus said. "I understand that everything worth having comes with a cost. I'm not afraid of hard work, and I'm not afraid of consequences." Dominic studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Then let me tell you about Castellano Holdings." For the next hour, Dominic outlined the empire he had built. The legitimate businesses, real estate development, restaurants, construction companies, import-export operations, the charitable foundations, the political connections, the web of relationships that made things happen in a city where nothing happened by accident. What he did not mention, what hung unspoken in the air between them, was the other side of the business. Marcus was not naive. He knew that men like Dominic Castellano did not build empires through legitimate means alone, but he also understood that there were different kinds of power, different ways of operating, and that sometimes the line between legal and illegal was less a wall than a suggestion. "You will start in the development division," Dominic said. "You will learn the business from the ground up. I do not care that you have not finished your degree. What matters is whether you can learn, whether you can adapt, whether you can think." "And if I prove myself?" Dominic smiled. It was the smile of a chess player who had already seen 10 moves ahead. "Then we will see what you are truly capable of." The weeks that followed were the most challenging of Marcus's life. He worked 18-hour days, learning everything from contract law to construction management, from financial modeling to negotiation tactics. He sat in meetings where billions of dollars changed hands with the scratch of a pen. He watched Dominic operate, studied how he read people, how he controlled rooms without raising his voice, how he inspired loyalty through a combination of fear and genuine care. But it was not all business. Dominic seemed genuinely invested in Marcus's development, not just professionally but personally. He invited Marcus to dinners at his home, a brownstone in the Upper East Side that was warm despite its obvious wealth. He introduced Marcus to his wife, Elena, a fierce Italian woman who fed him homemade pasta and asked pointed questions about his intentions. "Dominic sees something in you," Elena said one evening, while Marcus helped her clean dishes. "He does not extend himself like this. Not anymore, not since—" She trailed off, and Marcus sensed a sadness beneath her words. "Since what?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "We had a son, Antonio. He would have been about your age now. Would have been. He was taken from us when he was 16. A car accident, they said." Her voice hardened. "But it was no accident. It was a message from people who wanted to hurt Dominic, who wanted him to know that his family was not untouchable." Marcus felt the weight of her words settle over him. "I am sorry." Elena touched his face, a gesture so maternal that it made his chest ache. You remind Dominic of Antonio, not in looks but in spirit. That fire, that determination, he sees it in you, and it gives him hope. Hope for what? Hope that everything he has built will not die with him. Hope that there are still young men who understand what it means to earn something, to sacrifice, to protect what matters. That night, Marcus lay awake in his apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling that had been the sky of his childhood. He thought about Dominic and Elena, about the son they had lost, about the empire that awaited someone to inherit it. He thought about his own father, who had died of a heart attack on the floor of the factory where he worked, who had given everything for a family that could barely afford to bury him. And he thought about the choice that lay before him. To enter Dominic's world fully was to accept everything that came with it, the power, the privilege, but also the shadows, the dangers, the enemies who lurked in darkness. Was he ready for that? Could he become the man Dominic seemed to believe he was? He did not know, but he knew that he would find out. 3 months after that first night at the gala, Marcus received a phone call that would test everything he had learned. "There is a situation." Dominic's voice was tense in a way Marcus had never heard. "Meet me at the warehouse on Pier 47. Come alone." The warehouse was a vast, empty space that smelled of salt and rust and old secrets. Dominic stood in a pool of light from a single overhead lamp, surrounded by shadows that seemed to move with menace. And there, bound to a chair in the center of the space, was Preston, Victoria Ashford's date from the gala, the man who had recorded Marcus's humiliation on his phone. "Marcus," Dominic said, "I wanted you to see this." Preston's face was swollen, one eye blackened, his expensive suit torn and dirty. He looked at Marcus with something between terror and recognition. "You," Preston whispered, "you are the waiter." Marcus felt his stomach turn. Whatever this was, it was not what he had expected when he accepted Dominic's offer. "This man," Dominic said, circling Preston like a shark, "has been doing some very interesting things since the gala. He has been spreading rumors about you, Marcus, telling people that you are a fraud, that I have taken you in as some sort of pet project, that you will never amount to anything." Preston whimpered. "I was just talking. Just words. I did not mean anything by it. Just words." Dominic stopped circling and faced Marcus. "Words are never just words. They are weapons. They shape perception, destroy reputations, ruin lives." He gestured toward Preston. "This man tried to use words to tear you down, to undo everything you are building." Marcus looked at Preston, at the fear in his eyes, at the trembling in his limbs. He remembered the gala, the recording, the cruel laughter. He remembered how small he had felt in that moment, how helpless. But he also remembered what Dominic had taught him, that true strength was not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary. "What are you asking me to do?" Marcus said quietly. Dominic smiled. "I am asking you to decide. What happens to this man is your choice. You can walk away, and I will handle it my way. Or you can show him what happens to people who try to hurt the people I care about." Marcus stood silent for a long moment. The warehouse seemed to press in on him, the shadows watching, waiting. Then he stepped forward until he was standing directly in front of Preston. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," Marcus said. "You think you know what power is. You think it is about money, connections, being able to hurt people who cannot fight back. But you do not know anything." He leaned closer. "Power is not about destruction. Power is about choice, and I am choosing to let you go." Preston's eyes widened in disbelief. "I am letting you go because I am not what you think I am. I am not going to become a monster just because monsters tried to make me small." Marcus straightened. "But understand this. But if you ever speak my name again, if you ever try to hurt me or anyone I care about, I will not be so merciful. Not because I want to destroy you, but because I will protect what matters. Do you understand?" Preston nodded frantically. Marcus turned to Dominic. "Let him go." For a moment, Dominic's expression was unreadable. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, not the cold smile of the businessman, but something warmer, something almost like pride. "You passed," Dominic said. "Passed what?" "The test." Dominic gestured, and men emerged from the shadows to untie Preston. "Anyone can learn to be ruthless. Ruthlessness is easy, but mercy, true mercy, the kind that comes from strength rather than weakness, that is rare." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You are ready." "Ready for what?" Dominic's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "To become who you were always meant to be." Chapter 3. 2 years had passed since the night at the warehouse, and Marcus Rivera had transformed from a waiter into something unrecognizable to his former self. At 28, He ran the development division of Castellano Holdings with an efficiency that impressed even Dominic's most seasoned executives. He wore suits that fit like they were made for him, because they were. He drove a car that cost more than his mother's entire house. He had an apartment in the financial district with views of the harbor and a cleaning service that came 3 times a week. But success had not softened him. If anything, it had sharpened him, honed him into a blade that could cut through problems with surgical precision. He had learned to read people the way Dominic did, to see their weaknesses and strengths, their fears and desires, all in a single glance. And he had learned other things too, darker things, things about the true nature of Castellano Holdings that were never discussed in boardrooms or recorded in minutes. He knew about the arrangements with certain officials, the payments that ensured projects moved forward without delays. He knew about the construction companies that were fronts for other operations, the restaurants that served more than just food. He knew that Dominic's empire was built on a foundation that was not entirely legitimate. And he had made his peace with it, not because he approved, but because he understood that the world was more complicated than the simple morality he had been taught in Sunday school. Sometimes good people did questionable things. Sometimes the only way to protect what mattered was to operate in the shadows. The party at the Ashford estate was not something Marcus wanted to attend, but Dominic insisted. Victoria's father is dying, Dominic explained. Heart condition. He has maybe 6 months left, and he wants to make amends before he goes. Amends for what? For being a monster his entire life. Dominic's voice held no sympathy. Charles Ashford made his fortune by destroying small businesses, crushing competitors, and using his pharmaceutical company to price medications beyond what ordinary people could afford. He ruined countless lives, but now that he is facing his own mortality, he suddenly wants to play the penitent. And you want me there because you are the symbol of everything Charles failed to see in his life. You are proof that character matters more than birthright, and because Victoria will be there, and I want her to see exactly what you have become. Marcus understood. This was not just about Charles Ashford's redemption, it was about demonstrating power, about showing the old guard that the world was changing, whether they liked it or not. The Ashford estate in Connecticut was obscene in its grandeur, a 100-room mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and private forest, more monument than home. As Marcus walked through the front doors, he remembered the last time he had seen Victoria, her face twisted with cruelty as she mocked him for dreaming of sitting at tables like hers. Tonight he was not serving drinks. Tonight he was one of the guests. He found Victoria on the terrace looking out at the gardens with a champagne flute dangling from her fingers. She had aged in the 2 years since the gala, though not in ways that could be measured in wrinkles or grey hair. It was something in her eyes, a hollowness that spoke of consequence. "Marcus Rivera," she said without turning, "I heard you might be coming." Victoria. She turned to face him, and he saw that she was fighting to maintain her composure. "You look well. Success suits you." "It does." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No false modesty? I remember when you could barely meet my eyes. I remember when you thought that meant something." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of history hanging between them. "My father is asking for you," Victoria said finally. "He is in the library. What does he want? To apologize, I think, or maybe just to ease his conscience before—" She trailed off, and for a moment she looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "I am sorry about your father," Marcus said, "regardless of our history." Victoria looked at him with something like surprise. "You mean that?" "I do." "Why? After what I did to you?" "After how I treated you, why would you care about my pain?" Marcus considered the question. It would have been easy to tell her that she deserved whatever suffering came her way, that karma had finally caught up with the cruel princess. But that was not who he was, not who he wanted to be. Because holding on to hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, he said. "Someone wise told me that once." "Your mother?" "No, a man who saw something in me when no one else did." He left her on the terrace and made his way to the library, where Charles Ashford waited in a wheelchair, oxygen tubes trailing from his nose like the strings of a puppet who had finally run out of energy. "Mr. Rivera," Charles said. His voice was a rasp, barely louder than a whisper. "Thank you for coming. You asked to see me." "I did." Charles gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. What I have to say will take some time." Marcus sat, waiting. "I have done terrible things in my life," Charles began. "I have crushed people without a second thought. Convinced that my power gave me the right to do whatever I pleased, I told myself that I was just playing the game, that everyone in my position did the same." He paused, struggling to catch his breath. but games have winners and losers, and I am finally realizing that I may have won all the battles and still lost the war. What war? Charles looked at him with eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. The war for my own soul. The war to be someone my children could respect, someone my wife could love, someone who left the world better than he found it. He reached into his pocket with trembling hands and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Marcus took the envelope, but did not open it. "What is it?" "A check. $5 million. Charles held up a hand to stop Marcus's protest. "I know what you are thinking, that this is guilt money, that I am trying to buy absolution. And maybe you are right, but I also know what my daughter did to you at that gala. I know the cruelty she showed, and I know that it was my fault, because I taught her that cruelty. I raised her to believe that people like you were beneath her." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so close to death. "I was wrong, about everything, and I cannot undo the past, but I can try to make the future a little bit better. Take the money, Marcus. Use it to help people, build something that matters, prove that a man can rise from nothing and still remain good." Marcus looked at the envelope in his hands. $5 million. More money than his father had earned in his entire life. More money than he had ever imagined holding, and yet it felt wrong. It felt like accepting it would somehow validate the system that had produced Charles Ashford in the first place. "I cannot take this," Marcus said, setting the envelope on the table between them. Charles's face fell. "Why not? I am trying to do something good for once in my life." "I know. But redemption is not something you can buy. It is something you earn through actions, through choices, through the hard work of becoming a different person." Marcus stood. "If you want to make amends, Mr. Ashford, then use your last months to change your company. Lower the prices on the medications that are killing people who cannot afford them. Fund scholarships for kids from neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. Leave your children an inheritance that matters, not money, but principles." Charles stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "You are everything my daughter said you were not," he whispered. "You are remarkable." Marcus paused at the door. "I am just a waiter who learned that dignity is not for sale. Everything else I'm still figuring out." He left the library and made his way back through the mansion, past rooms full of inherited wealth and acquired indifference. At the front door, he found Dominic waiting for him. "You turned down $5 million, Dominic said. "It was not a question. You heard." "I hear everything." "Are you angry?" Dominic smiled, and there was genuine warmth in it. "Angry? Marcus, I have never been prouder of anyone in my life. Do you know how many people would have taken that money without a second thought? Is that the test, another one of your games? No games. Not tonight." Dominic placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tonight was about showing me who you really are, and you showed me." They walked out into the night together, leaving the Ashford estate behind. The air was cold, but Marcus did not feel it. He felt something else instead, something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like he was finally becoming the man he was meant to be. If this story has touched something inside you, if you feel that pull of emotion right now, I want you to pause and leave a comment with just one word: dignity. Drop that word in the comments right now, because this moment deserves to be marked. And it helps me know that this story matters to you as much as it matters to me. Chapter 4. The call came at 3 in the morning, jarring Marcus from a dreamless sleep. "There is a problem." Dominic's voice was like ice. "Get to the hospital. Now." Marcus did not ask questions. He threw on clothes and drove through empty streets, his heart pounding with dread. In all the time he had known Dominic, he had never heard him sound like that, like the world was crumbling. The hospital was a harsh landscape of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Marcus found Dominic in a private waiting room, surrounded by men who looked like they would be more comfortable with weapons than with the magazines scattered on the tables. "What happened?" "Elena." Dominic's voice cracked on the word. "Someone attacked her in the parking garage of our building. She was coming home from the charity dinner, and they—" He could not finish. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Elena. Strong, fierce, loving Elena, who had welcomed him into their home, who had treated him like family. "Is she going to be okay?" "They do not know. The doctors are still working." Dominic looked up, and for the first time, Marcus saw something he had never expected to see in those storm-grey eyes. Tears. "I should have been there. I should have protected her." "Who did this?" Dominic's expression hardened into something dangerous. "The Marchetti family. This is their way of sending a of telling me that I have gone too far, that I need to remember my place. Marcus knew the Marchetti name. They were the old guard, the traditional crime families who had ruled New York for generations before men like Dominic had risen to challenge their dominance. For years there had been an uneasy peace, territories divided, conflicts avoided. But that peace had been fraying as Dominic's empire expanded. What are you going to do? What I have to do. Dominic stood, and the transformation was visible, the grieving husband becoming something else, something harder, something terrifying. They want war? They will have war. They will learn what it means to touch my family. Dominic, Marcus stepped in front of him. Think about this. If you go after them now, while you are emotional, you will make mistakes. And Elena needs you here. Get out of my way. No, Marcus held his ground. I am not going to let you destroy yourself. Not tonight, not like this. For a moment it seemed like Dominic might strike him. The tension in the room was suffocating, the men around them shifting uncomfortably. No one spoke to Dominic Castellano like that. No one defied him. But Marcus held his gaze, refusing to back down, refusing to let the man he had come to think of as a father figure make a decision that could cost him everything. Finally, slowly, Dominic's shoulders slumped. You are right, he whispered. You are right. The next hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He sat with Dominic in that waiting room, watching the clock, waiting for news. Around them, the men who made up Dominic's inner circle paced and muttered, their anger a living thing that demanded release. But Marcus kept them calm. He fetched coffee, he made calls, he handled the arrangements that needed to be made, while Dominic could not function. He became, in that moment, the steady presence that everyone needed. At dawn, a doctor emerged. Elena was stable. She would recover, though it would take months. The attack had been brutal but not fatal. When Marcus saw the relief flood Dominic's face, the way the older man seemed to age and unage in the same moment, he understood something fundamental about power. It was not about money or influence or the ability to destroy your enemies. It was about having something worth protecting. It was about love. Marcus, Dominic's voice was rough with emotion. I owe you a debt I can never repay. You do not owe me anything. I owe you everything. Dominic gripped his arm with surprising strength. Tonight, you saved me from myself. You reminded me of what matters. That is worth more than any empire. They stood together in the hospital hallway, the morning light filtering through windows that had witnessed countless moments of hope and despair. And Marcus realized that somewhere along the way, Dominic Castellano had stopped being just a mentor. He had become family. The weeks that followed were tense. Security was doubled around all of Dominic's operations. Marcus moved into the guest house on Dominic's property, partly to help with Elena's recovery, partly because it was safer than his apartment. And slowly, carefully, they began to plan their response to the Marchetti attack. We cannot respond with violence, Marcus argued during one late-night strategy session. That is what they expect. That is what they want. A street war would destroy everything you have built. Then what do you suggest? Dominic asked. We destroy them without firing a shot. We use their own tactics against them. Marcus spread documents across the table, financial records, legal filings, investigative reports. The Marchetti empire is built on corruption. They have bribed politicians, judges, law enforcement. They think they are untouchable because they own the system. They do own the system, parts of it, but not all of it. And I've been doing some research. Marcus pointed to a name on one of the documents. Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. She has been building a case against the Marchettis for years, but has never been able to get enough evidence to move forward. Her investigation keeps getting blocked by people on the Marchetti payroll. Dominic studied the documents. You want to help the FBI take down our enemies. I want to remove the Marchettis from the board without any of our people getting hurt, without any blood on our hands. Let the justice system do what it was designed to do. And if they come for us, we are not exactly spotless ourselves. Marcus hesitated. This was the moment he had been building toward, the conversation he knew would determine everything. Maybe it is time to become spotless. Maybe it is time to leave the shadows behind. Dominic was silent for a long moment. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, millions of lives interweaving in patterns too complex to comprehend. You are asking me to give up everything I have built, Dominic said finally. I am asking you to build something better, something that will last, something your grandchildren can inherit without shame. And if I say no? Marcus met his gaze steadily. Then I will respect your decision, but I will not be part of it. Not anymore. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of everything they had built together, everything they might lose. Then Dominic smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his face from stone to something almost boyish. "You know what I see when I look at you, Marcus? I see the man I should have been, the man I could have been, if someone had given me the same choice I am giving you now." He stood and extended his hand. "Let us do this. Let us build something worthy of the second chance we have both been given." Marcus took his hand, and in that grip was a promise of transformation, of redemption, of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The war against the Marchettis would not be fought with guns and violence. It would be fought with truth. Chapter 5. The downfall of the Marchetti family happened not with a bang, but with the click of a mouse. Marcus spent months building the case, working with Agent Chen to compile evidence that painted a picture of corruption so vast it made headlines across the country. Bank records, wire transfers, photographs, testimony from witnesses who had been waiting decades for someone brave enough to listen to their stories. The key breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Victoria Ashford. She appeared at Marcus's office one morning, looking nothing like the polished heiress who had mocked him at the gala. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her eyes carrying a depth that had not been there before. "My father died last week," she said quietly. "I know, I am sorry. Before he died, he told me something about the Marchettis." She pulled a flash drive from her purse and set it on Marcus's desk. "My father's pharmaceutical company has been laundering money for them for 15 years. Everything is documented here. Accounts, transactions, names." Marcus stared at the flash drive. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because my father asked me to, because he wanted to do one good thing before he died." Victoria's voice trembled. "And because I am trying to become someone different, someone better." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I never apologized to you for what I did at the gala, for how I treated you. I know. I'm sorry, Marcus. I was cruel, and I was wrong, and you did not deserve any of it." "No, I did not." She nodded, accepting the truth without excuses. "For what it is worth, I think you have become something remarkable, something I could never be. It is never too late to become who you want to be, Victoria. Someone wise told me that once." She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost like a different person, like the woman she might have been if circumstances had been different. "Thank you for not hating me. I think I would have, if our positions were reversed. Hatred is exhausting. I have too much to build to waste energy on destruction." After she left, Marcus sat alone in his office, turning the flash drive over in his hands. It represented the final piece of the puzzle, the evidence that would bring down an empire of corruption and violence. But it also represented something else. It represented proof that people could change, that redemption was possible, that the universe had a way of bringing things full circle in ways no one could predict. The arrests happened at dawn on a Tuesday morning. 37 members of the Marchetti organization, including the patriarch himself, were taken into custody in coordinated raids across 3 states. The news coverage was constant, talking heads speculating about what it meant for organized crime in America. What the news did not report was the role Castellano Holdings had played in making it happen. That was by design. Marcus and Dominic had agreed that their involvement would remain in the shadows, not to protect themselves, but to protect the process. The case needed to be about justice, not about one crime family taking down another. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. Dominic announced a massive restructuring of his organization, divesting from questionable operations and investing in legitimate businesses. A new charitable foundation was established in Antonio's name, providing scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Elena recovered fully and threw herself into the foundation's work with a passion that surprised everyone. And Marcus found himself being offered something he had never expected. "I want you to take over," Dominic said one evening. They were sitting in the garden behind the brownstone, watching the sun set over Manhattan's skyline. "When I am gone, I want you to run everything. The legitimate businesses, the foundation, all of it. Dominic, I cannot, you can. You have proven it 100 times over." The older man's eyes were warm. "Marcus, I have no one else. No children, no heirs, no one I trust the way I trust you. You are my legacy. Everything I have built, everything I am trying to build now, it needs someone to carry it forward. What about the other aspects of your organization? The people who might not want to see things change. They will adapt or they will leave. That is the choice I am giving them. The The same choice I am giving myself." Dominic smiled. "You have taught me something, Marcus. You have taught me that there is no honor in building an empire if that empire is built on suffering. I want to spend whatever years I have left creating something good, something worthy." Marcus looked at the city spread before them, the lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. He thought about his father, who had dreamed of giving his family a better life. He thought about his mother, who was finally getting the medical care she deserved. He thought about the 16-year-old boy who had stood by his father's grave and promised himself that he would become something. "I will do it," he said, "on one condition. Name it. I will do it my way. No shortcuts, no compromises, nothing that would make my father ashamed." Dominic extended his hand. "That is all I ever wanted." They shook on it, and as their hands clasped, Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a mantle. He was no longer the waiter who had been mocked at a gala. He was no longer the poor kid from Washington Heights with impossible dreams. He was something new, something he had created through choice, through sacrifice, through the stubborn refusal to let his circumstances define his destiny. He was Marcus Rivera, and his story was just beginning. Chapter 6. 5 years later. The annual Rivera Foundation Gala was unlike any other charity event in New York. Instead of the usual parade of wealth and privilege, it was filled with young people from underprivileged neighborhoods, scholarship recipients who were being celebrated for their achievements, community leaders who had dedicated their lives to making a difference. Marcus stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd gathered in the ballroom of the Sterling Hotel, the same hotel where his life had changed forever. The irony was not lost on him. 10 years ago, he began, I stood in this very room, wearing a white serving jacket, carrying trays of champagne for people who saw me as nothing more than furniture. A woman invited me to sit at her table, not out of kindness, but so she could humiliate me in front of everyone she thought mattered. He paused, letting the words settle. That night, I learned something important about the world. I learned that there are people who believe their money gives them the right to treat others as less than human. But I also learned something else. I learned that power, real power, comes not from wealth or status, but from character, from integrity, from the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it costs you everything. He looked out at the faces before him, seeing his younger self reflected in their eyes. A man once told me that he saw himself in me, that he saw the same hunger, the same determination, the same refusal to be defined by circumstances. That man changed my life. He gave me the opportunity to become something I never imagined possible, and he taught me that the greatest gift we can give is not money or influence, but the belief that someone can become more than they are. His voice strengthened. Tonight I make you the same promise that was made to me. If you work hard, if you stay true to who you are, if you never let the world convince you that you are less than you were born to be, I will be there. I will fight for you. I will believe in you, even when you cannot believe in yourself. He raised his glass. To everyone who has ever been dismissed, to everyone who has ever been told they could not, to everyone who has ever looked at their reflection and wondered if they would ever become something. This toast is for you. The room erupted in applause, but Marcus barely heard it. He was looking at the back of the room where Dominic Castellano stood with Eleanor, both of them beaming with pride. Dominic was slower now, his hair fully silver, but his eyes still held that storm cloud intensity, that quiet power. After the speeches and the celebrations, Marcus made his way through the crowd to where Dominic waited. Not bad, Dominic said. For a waiter, I had a good teacher. They embraced, and Marcus felt the strength still remaining in the older man's arms. Dominic had become the father he had lost too soon, the mentor he had needed, the proof that even in the darkest world, there was light for those brave enough to seek it. I have something for you, Dominic said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small box and handed it to Marcus. Inside was a ring, a simple band of white gold with an inscription on the inside, Rise. My father gave this to me when I was your age, Dominic explained. He told me that no matter where I came from, no matter what obstacles I faced, I had the power to rise. I have worn it every day since, and now I want you to have it. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Dominic, I cannot accept this. You can, and you must. The older man's voice was firm but gentle. Everything I have, everything I am, it continues through you. That ring is not just jewelry, it is a promise, a reminder of who you are and where you came from, a symbol that rising is not just possible, it is your destiny. Marcus slipped the ring onto his finger, and it fit perfectly as though it had always been waiting for him. They stood together for a moment, Two men who had started with nothing and built something extraordinary, not through violence or corruption, but through the simple, revolutionary act of believing that they could be better than the world expected them to be. "There is one more thing," Dominic said. "Someone wants to see you." Marcus turned and felt his heart skip a beat. His mother stood near the entrance, wearing a dress that he had bought for her, her grey hair swept up elegantly, her face radiant with health and happiness. The medical treatments that his success had afforded had given her back years of life that poverty would have stolen. "Mijo," she said, opening her arms. He went to her and held her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling the same warmth and safety he had felt as a child in their cramped apartment in Washington Heights. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud." "Everything I am is because of you," Marcus said. "Everything I have achieved, everything I hope to become. It started with you teaching me that dignity matters more than wealth, that character matters more than circumstances." She cupped his face in her hands, and he saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "You have proven something tonight, Marcus. You have proven that a mother's love and a father's sacrifice were not wasted. You have become the man we always knew you could be." The gala continued around them, filled with laughter and music and hope. Marcus moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, connecting young scholars with mentors who could help them build their futures. And throughout the evening, he kept returning to a single memory: the moment when Dominic Castellano had stood up in a crowded ballroom and said two words that changed everything. "To my brother." That toast had not just elevated a waiter, it had declared something profound about what humanity could be, about the possibility that power could be used for protection rather than domination, that wealth could be directed toward building others up rather than tearing them down. Marcus had spent his life proving that such a world was possible, and now, as he looked around at the young faces filled with hope and determination, he knew that his work would continue through them. The cycle of dignity would not end with him. It would grow, spreading outward like ripples from a stone thrown into still water, touching lives he would never know, changing futures he would never see. That was the true meaning of legacy. That was the true meaning of rising. Outside the ballroom windows, Manhattan glittered like a galaxy of possibilities. Somewhere out there, a young person was struggling, doubting, wondering if they would ever become anything. And if Marcus had his way, they would find the same thing he had found on the darkest night of his life. Not just a hand reaching down to help them up, but a voice declaring them worthy of respect, worthy of opportunity, worthy of becoming everything they were born to be. Because that is what we owe each other. Not charity, not pity, recognition, belief, brotherhood. The story of Marcus Rivera was no longer about one man's journey from waiter to titan. It was about what happens when we choose to see the humanity in those society tells us to ignore. It was about the transformative power of dignity offered freely, without expectation of return. And it was proof that the most revolutionary act in a world designed to keep people down is simply this: to stand up and say, "You matter," to raise a glass and declare, "You are my brother," to believe, with unshakable conviction, that every human being carries within them the seed of something extraordinary. That seed needs only one thing to grow: someone who believes it is there. If you have watched this story until the very end, it is because something in Marcus's journey spoke to your soul. It is because you understand that dignity is not given by circumstance, but claimed by character. It is because you believe, as I believe, that every person deserves the chance to rise. Leave a comment right now saying, "I've watched this far," so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Your comment means everything to me. It shows me that these stories matter, that the time I spend creating them reaches hearts that need them. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their circumstances do not define their destiny. And if you are not already subscribed, please subscribe and turn on notifications. The stories we tell here are not just entertainment. They are reminders that in a world that often feels cold and indifferent, there are still people who believe in the power of human connection, human dignity, and human potential. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in stories that celebrate who we can become when we choose courage over comfort, integrity over advantage, and brotherhood over isolation. Until next time, remember that you are worthy of respect, you are capable of greatness, and somewhere out there, someone is waiting to believe in you. Rise.